So this is pitched at, my Submission's first day was kind of pitched at coaches. So this is kind of pitched at coaches, not that it wouldn't be beneficial for people who aren't coaches, but it would be phrased in a slightly different way if it was mainly to kind of athletes and to students, okay? So what I want to look at is something that continuously keeps getting raised by everybody. Coaching within like a more ecological framework or a more kind of live framework. What seems to be the kind of, the problem with our coaches is like, what do we do? What the fuck do we do now? Are we, because you're used to, or most people who have coached under the kind of, again, when I say traditional approach, I mean like everyone comes in, runs around for 10 minutes, does some star jumps, 3 very specific techniques that you drill against no resistance, then you spar. That's what I mean by traditional, okay? I'm assuming everybody initially encountered this kind of framework or this kind of structure of class when they started, yeah? Hands up who has just done ecological stuff right from the beginning and has never experienced the traditional Brazilian-led. Was there any Brazilians here, by the way? Is there no Brazilians here?
Yes.
One. That's my guy, okay. Just one Brazilian? Fucking hell. I tried to bring one with me and they wouldn't let him in. Okay, so yeah, as I say, it's about what, as a coach, you're looking to do when you're kind of running the classes. Obviously, Greg gave a very good kind of rundown of structuring the classes and what you're looking to do pre-class. Within the class, and again, it's what else you do. Again, I feel a lot of people still have this assumption that the design work is done, you walk into the class and it's kind of plug and play. The class starts, you let them do it, they come back, you go from there. Okay, and myself and a lot of other people found like you can plan a class as much as you want and you can do all the work outside it, but once you step on that mat, you're coaching what's in front of you, not what you want to be in front of you. Okay, that's the key thing. It's irrelevant what you've planned if the first 10 minutes it goes to shit and nothing's working, and then you're going to have to actually do some coaching, which is the biggest issue for a lot of people, okay? I want to roughly kind of cover what is the kind of current or perceived role of the coach, what a new role would potentially look like. I want to go over educating the athlete, which Greg doesn't agree with, which should be interesting. Understanding the athlete. Something I've been working on quite a lot with a lot of the coaches I've been working with is this idea of interventions, okay? When I say interventions, it's during the class, is this what I'm talking about, okay? When you see something potentially that you feel is wrong or could be modified or helped in some way, it's how you intervene, when you intervene, and how this kind of affects it, okay? Does that all roughly make sense, guys, okay? So, as I say, who's got a PDF now? Put your hands up. Yeah. Right, traditional kind of coaching role, current coaching role. What is the role of a coach under the normal, traditional, Brazilian-led kind of framework, guys? Sorry? Telling you what to do, yeah, so prescriptive. Anything else? Come on, you guys must have started under a normal coach, yeah. Just shout it out, you don't have to put your hands up, let's go.
They're just like a conduit of information. It's like someone taught them, like the person taught me this, I'm going to just relay what they told me to you.
Okay, perfect. Anything else?
Special dial with all the answers. Errors.
You mean,
errors.
That's Brazilian. Brazilian. No. Sorry.
Pointing out errors.
This is a really important one. Okay, really important one. Anything else? Intervening. So if you were a normal coach, or I say normal coach, traditional coach, if you saw an error, what would your natural reaction be to intervene? What would you do if you went over to that athlete? So you see an error, you feel there's a better way of doing it. How would you fix it?
You can tell them what a better option is, or you have them move and then you demonstrate it yourself,
Yeah.
and then you have them jump out.
Great. Yeah. Anything else? You've pretty much covered it all anyway. Okay. So if we're teaching under a more ecological framework, we're looking at more live training. It's more about kind of exploration and self-discovery. What's the role of the coach? What do you do as the coach? Set the environment. Yep. Anything else? Facilitate. Guide. Yeah, these are good words. Anything else? good. This is the point. This is kind of the response I'm getting from a lot of people. Everyone knows what the kind of predefined role of a coach is under a normal kind of IP-led, instructional-led kind of framework, but people are now unsure as to what the fuck you do as a coach if you're not kind of interacting and kind of fixing stuff and doing all this kind of stuff. Okay, you can look at the PDFs now, or the framework now. So what I've got down with the current traditional provider of all knowledge, which is pretty much what you're going to get. It's going to normally be within some form of a hierarchical kind of belt-led system. That's normally how it works. You tend to find that the hierarchy or the belt dictates who you listen to and who you don't listen to, whether you realize it or not. You find that, again, even if you're quite an open person, I think within those environments, you start to pay less attention to what people who are lower grades are saying to you, and you pay more attention to what, okay? You can be very self-aware about it, and you can be, you can be aware that you're doing this, but within that environment, it kind of shapes it, and you find that you do this more anyway, okay? So again, it kind of makes an example of why the environment is so important. It's primarily knowledge about. So the distinction between knowledge about and knowledge of. Knowledge about is knowing about something kind of secondhand, okay? And that's pretty much what the traditional approach is doing. The instructor is providing knowledge about. They're providing an example of the technique from their perspective and how it works. And then the ability to kind of gain knowledge of, which is first-hand experience, is very difficult under the old school framework, because you then go into passive drilling, and the knowledge of that technique is kind of irrelevant because there's no resistance. And you're learning how to do this technique, and you're learning about this technique in an environment which is not the environment you're going to be doing it, okay? So this is kind of pushes as to why we want this live environment. The main kind of method of delivery of the information is direct instruction, and a lot of it does tend to be internal focus of attention. Who brought up the question about focus of attention, by the way? Nobody wants to admit to it. It's a really good question, by the way. Where am I looking? Focus of attention? Yeah. I think this is a really...
I have right now, I'm sorry. I'm actually looking for your PDF right now.
It's fine. That's probably more relevant than what I'm saying. Focus of attention is a big thing. And to be honest, it's the awareness of that anyway. With most kind of coaches, the awareness is not there of this internal, external focus of attention. Ecological dynamics aside, if you're teaching the old school way, it's still better to teach with instruction that has an external focus of attention as opposed to internal focus of attention. So again, one of the things that's bothered me for a long time is people that still teach in a more kind of cognitive way, they still don't teach that way very fucking well anyway. They have no awareness of kind of working memory and cognitive load. I have no awareness of the language and the focus of attention, okay? But again, I believe focus of attention is a very important thing. Yes.
Can you give me an example of external attention versus internal attention on like the same topic, like how do you do it one way versus another way?
Okay, so if you're looking to arm drag somebody, for instance, what you would look to do is you're gaining control of your opponent's wrist, and you would basically say, try and pull your arm across your body, okay? But again, it would be your arm. So the attention would go to a part of your body. Now, if it was an external focus of attention, it would be gain control of their arm and try and pull their arm across your center line or their center line from there, okay? So it's the easiest way to look at it is when the goal is that everything you're reacting to is going to be within the environment, really. Okay, so you want to be attending to the environment. Now, when you say to someone to think about moving their hips or think about moving their arm, that attention kind of goes inwards. So the attention is taken away from the environment. Now, the only way you're going to be able to operate efficiently within an environment is if you're paying attention to the environment. So the language you're using, it seems really kind of subtle and it seems really kind of not important, but it makes a big difference. And again, there's a lot of research with various kind of research like Gabby Wolf, and there's a lot of support for this kind of internal, external attention. So the use of language is really important here, okay? Again, traditional role fixes perceived errors as soon as they occur. There's two things about this. So there's something I've kind of referred to as a writing or a correcting reflex. I definitely stole it from someone, and I can't remember who I stole it from. But it's this idea. I think anyone who was taught the old way, or even now, when you see a problem, you will have this kind of reflex of that's wrong, I'll go and fix it. Okay, it's a natural reaction to seeing a problem. You're a coach, you fix it. Okay, and again, within the old school kind of routine, you would then go and you would fix it. Okay, so it's important that you're aware of this kind of writing or kind of correcting error when you're starting to coach. Okay, idealized techniques. They're teaching you. I used to teach the stuff that worked for me. I used to teach the stuff that I thought was the best way, irrelevant of whether the person was like 6'4" or they were a child. And we all know, again, these kind of individual differences and action capabilities are very, very important. Okay, so with a new role, ultimately what a coach is looking to do now, you're not seen as this kind of oracle or person who will deliver all of the information, all of the knowledge. If you are nowadays anyway, you're becoming obsolete because that shit's out there. And to be honest, there's probably instructionals that teach in this method better than you're going to teach. Okay, so your goal is to provide or facilitate learning opportunities. Okay, your goal is to create an environment, to create opportunities within that environment that people can learn. Okay, that's the key thing. That's the main thing. Environment architecture, this can be physical, it can be kind of a psychological thing, but Greg talked about culture. This idea of culture and atmosphere is a really important thing in my opinion, and that can kind of make or break your approach anyway. Okay, the atmosphere and the culture and the way people work and engage within that environment has to be, yes, so.
So based off of what you're saying right now, building the right culture and environment, what if you're at a gym that is still is half IP and then half what we're here for?
I don't have an answer for that. I've been asked that a lot because I have a lot of students that I do kind of private work with and things, and they train at other places, and I'm doing what I think is I'm trying to get them to train the best way I can and inform them the best way I can for them to train, but their primary training environment is not that way. So I'm still working on ways of them kind of, because again, you go to another club, like whether you believe one way or another, you've got to be respectful. You're going to a club, you don't want to be telling the instructors they're wrong, and you want to go in and be respectful. You take part in the warm-up and everything, whether So I think that is a very, very hard question to kind of answer. Like that's going to be the problem, because if you're training within an environment that is structured around like an IP or a kind of a provision of information, and it's going to be very, very hard. Okay, because the assumption as well is there's going to be less live training. So if anybody ever comes up with an answer to that, I'd like to know it, because I think it's very, very difficult. Okay, trying to operate a certain way inside an environment which doesn't facilitate that, whatever you're doing is going to be very, very different. Okay, manipulation of constraints design, which again is what Greg was talking about with the invariable kind of components. You are looking to design constraints and games that basically focus the attention and the attention of the athlete. Okay, I'm not going to go into much about this because again I knew Greg was going to talk about it. I want to try and overlap as little as possible. Okay, focus on supporting athletes to gain knowledge of. This is the other thing. Okay, the distinction, as I say, between knowledge about, which is me providing information to you about something, and knowledge of, which is you firsthand gaining that knowledge within the environment that you're trying to operate in. That's really important. So whenever you're teaching, however you're teaching, your goal is to provide the athlete with the opportunity to experience and gain that knowledge of with as little kind of interference or kind of knowledge about from you. Okay? And again, we'll talk about it later. I'm not saying that it's wrong to provide knowledge about. There may be times that knowledge about may help facilitate their search and may allow them to explore more, but that's going to be on a very, very individual level. Yes, sorry.
I hate to ask exactly who said that, but can you provide an example
of
when providing knowledge would be a benefit?
For instance, so this is going to come into the intervention side of things, but yes. So again, if you feel that there will be times where people are not necessarily engaging well with the task. Now, whether that is a kind of a lack of understanding, a lack of confidence, an issue with training partners, various things like this. So we will talk in quite a lot of detail about this, because this idea of knowledge about and potentially using direct instruction, that there are times that just that little bit of kind of direct instruction may then kick on, allow them to search more efficiently.
Would that be sort of like to spitball, right? Like a placement of the hand and cueing it like that, or is it more of a...
It's, again, the answer to most of my questions is going to be it depends. it depends how, because all the interventions, when we come down to this framework of intervention, I can give you an idea of how to intervene and different ways of intervening, but it's like me trying to teach you timing and decision making in the technique. Like that has to be like a personal thing. You have to, a coach like the athlete is learning to read the environment and interact with the environment. Now the better coach you become, the easier you're going to be able to pick up on information within the environment and know when to intervene, when not to intervene. Okay? So there is a huge overlap here. How you're trying to get your students to train is how you should be kind of training as a coach yourself. Because this is a dual process. Yep.
Piggybacking on that, like, so you're designing these games, and you have two people that are pretty equally matched in terms of physical ability and experience level, and one person is constantly failing to win the game.
Yeah.
Is that when you're giving them a little hint or an intervention?
Yes. These will be, these will be certain circumstances. We'll talk about, there's a framework, something called challenge point, which I'm quite heavy on. And this idea of kind of challenge point is having challenging training. So if you're having training partners you're better than, worse than, the game or the protocol that's been designed, you have to find a way to make it a challenge. Because you'll have had this before where you've been given a game and it can be very elegantly designed with all these kind of clever constraints, but the person isn't very good and you're really good, and you can just smash the person and have 100% success. They have 0% success. Now, neither of you are actually developing and improving. There's no adaptation there for the skill because there's no pressure. So it's understanding how to intervene to potentially level this up a bit. But with the challenge point as well, this is going to be, a lot of the responsibility is going to be put on the more experienced people, okay? But again, we'll come, like both of these questions we're going to come back to, so I'd like to say they're good questions because I feel I may sort of answer them. Other thing about the new role is allowing time for athletes to perceive errors themselves, self-correct or self-organize, okay? This kind of is you fighting against that righting reflex. So you see an error, you know, it may be an error, it may not be an error, but it's trying to restrain from going over fixing it straight away. Because you learn through making mistakes, you learn through failure and discovering how to find ways of doing things. Now, if you see a mistake, you go and correct it, potentially what you're doing is you're taking that person out of an opportunity which would have been very, very good for them to learn something. So it's allowing that failure, okay? Again, obviously the point is when does it become a failure that is kind of repeating and it's starting to hinder the progress, and when is it something that you can allow? Again, I'm sure people who have been starting to teach under this framework will have seen this before, where within a class you're seeing an error within a certain game and you come back 10 minutes later, it's not there anymore, they've found a way. So if I'd intervened there, I potentially could have fucked it up. So it's being aware that if you're jumping in straight away and you're kind of engaging with this righting or this correcting reflex, you're interfering with a, in my opinion, a better way of them learning. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, and the last one is education of athletes, and this is more to do with how they're kind of training and not what they're training. So I feel this is a big issue with a lot of kind of coaching nowadays. It's the focus is on what you're teaching, you know, what techniques it is, and it's not about how you're actually doing the training, okay? Whether again it's passive versus live kind of drilling, okay? All makes sense so far? Okay, so potential new role, the requirements. So as a new coach, if you're gonna try and coach efficiently or try and coach efficiently under a more ecological framework, this is probably one of the hardest things. You've got to kind of accept this loss of control. Now, as I say, like everyone's got ego, and maybe some people more than others. It's difficult. It's really, really difficult. Okay, so you're not gonna necessarily be that central focus and answer to every question, and you won't have guys come up to you asking questions all the time. I feel at my gym, I'm one of the people that gets asked questions less. All the people ask questions, they just kind of ignore me now, which I just feel is because I'm really great at designing games. It might not be, but it's accepting that. Okay, you may have put in 15 years of coaching, but you can't be that guy anymore. Yep.
So if somebody comes to you with a question,
I'll say it depends. The answer will be depend. Sorry. No, sorry, yes. So if they come to me with a question.
Yeah, would you like answer with something like if they tell you, let's say, something very detailed?
Yep.
Would you give the detail if they want, or you just put them in the situation and try?
Shit, the answer is actually depends. This is the thing. What you can do as a coach under this framework is answer every question this way, and you can't be wrong. Okay, so it will depend on who the athlete is, what their level is, what their personality is as well, because I believe understanding the athlete's personality and how they could operate is very important as well. There are certain people that I would potentially give that information to. But it would be a judgment call on the coach's behalf as to whether that would be the best way for them to learn it, or it would be another way. And again, this comes down to if you are going to intervene, how are you going to intervene? Are you going to give them the information, or are you going to use another way that potentially will allow them to find the answer themselves? Yes?
This is also going to be like it depends as an answer, but a lot of people in here are probably going to be coaching out of gyms that are primarily IP or transitioning away from IP.
Yeah, okay.
So most of their students are used to the coach being the distributor of information,
Yeah.
the person in control of power. How do you recommend them as coaches to transition to not just saying it depends, but moving away from giving the answer where the student themselves aren't getting frustrated or annoyed, or like you're saying, they just ignore you and move on to somebody else?
Yeah, that's important. So this is something we're going to talk about. That kind of annoyance and frustration and and loss of motivation, I think, is very, very important. Because that, again, this as a coach in this framework, that's your responsibility now. You have to manage that level of motivation and engagement within the room. And unfortunately, people aren't all going to lose motivation and engagement at the same time. Some people are, some people aren't. Now, can you get this person engaging more? These people are engaging, so can I get them engaging more, and how do you do it from there? And this is another thing with moving on from certain games to other games. When do you move on? Do you spend more time doing one than another? Are they engaging? Do you feel they're learning? Are they developing? If you don't feel that they're sufficiently kind of making progress or developing, or then potentially change it. But this is the thing, it's allowing yourself to be more open to this. The problem I've had with quite a few people is there's a lot of people who want to coach this way, and they're coaching within another gym with another head coach. And it's hard because I don't want them to undermine the other head coach, and I don't want them to be rude, and some people are not receptive to alternative approaches. No one likes to be told they're wrong. Like that's the thing. So it's understanding that, and to be honest, it may cause more problem for the students because there will then be a contradiction of training styles. So that it may cause, worse effects for that student. And what you may also find is people will pay less attention to you because you're not giving the answers. Because some people really just want the answers. It might not be the best thing for them, but who the fuck knows what's the best thing for people sometimes. So they will then go to that person that will provide the answer that they expect or they kind of want. So it's a tough situation.
It's also from young age, the public school system. Teach far more of an IP approach.
This is the problem. Yeah. Now, if someone's never trained jiu-jitsu before, I think everyone assumes if you come in and train jiu-jitsu, you've never done it before, and your first experience is under this framework, they've still experienced education through a providing of information, then a regurgitation of that information in a certain order to pass the exam. We're fighting against schooling system. This is the fucking problem. It's ingrained through the fucking schooling system that the teacher gives the information that is correct, you memorize the information, and then you're told the order to put it in an exam, and then the teacher meets their quota of passes and they don't get fired. This is the fucking issue. Yep.
One thing I was going to say, I was talking to Greg about this a little bit yesterday. It might be helpful to the people in here who are teaching out of IP gyms and don't want to butt heads or cause.
Out of interest, are you teaching out of an IP gym?
Yes,
or you are? So your head coach is?
Very traditional.
Yes, okay.
Judo background, so it's very.
Yeah, judo's worse. Judo. Yeah, have you heard of Cal Jones?
Yes.
Yeah, speak to him. Yeah, he's brilliant, Cal is.
Yes.
In fact, it should be Cal here, not me, in my opinion. But go on. Fuck you, man. At least fucking humor me, man. Sorry.
So I felt very stupid talking to Cal about designing games, just how simple he was able to make things. experience.
Yeah, me too.
But one thing I've talked with Greg about with designing games in an IP gym without causing issues with the coach was, and I want to see if you think this is a good option or if this is counterintuitive or just going to hold the students back, was I was figuring out whatever his lesson plans were, so whatever focus he was going to have, and then I framed it to the coach as if I was going to be putting them in live scenarios with constraints where they would have to use the techniques that were being taught. But in reality, they used everything that was within the constraints. So sometimes they did use the movement solution he wanted them to use. Sometimes they did something entirely differently. But it reinforced within the coach's mind that we were going to be working within the framework of what he's teaching. And some of the athletes did really well. Some of them just basically did resistant drum. That's all they were going to do. Some, it was true constraint-like games. But I wanted to see what your
I like that.
on that was.
Yeah, I like that. Again, it's something I've been writing an essay on this, the idea of trying to train in an ecological manner within an IP environment. And this is one of the things I've suggested to students because as I say, it's about being respectful, it's about engaging with the class, whether you agree with it or not. So if you're being taught a certain technique, I've made it aware to the person, like, what I want you to try and do in the teaching that technique is try and figure out different ways of achieving that. So any technique that's being taught will be the answer to a problem, and it will be it will have an end goal. Okay, so any technique that's taught, I've told them to try and think about what the end goal is and why they're teaching this specific way to answer the problem. And then you can look at what potentially the invariant features of that would be and go from there. But again, this comes down to educating the athlete as well, because they have to have an understanding of this way and why this way is kind of being applied. The problem you'll have, though, if they're trying to do that within that environment, potentially the coach will come over and tell them they're wrong, and no one wants to tell them they're wrong, so they're going to then fall back in line and try and kind of adhere to what the coach is saying out of respect or fear of being shouted at and things as well. So it's that the environment is, obviously the environment is everything, but it can affect people in very, very different ways in that way. But I like that. Did you just about to say you've left your gym now? And
Yes, I was in Louisiana. I just moved to Houston.
so are you setting up your own gym now, or you?
No, not yet. Don't have the funds for that.
You found an eco gym yet?
Unfortunately, there's not a lot of eco gyms in Houston. I don't think there's actually a single fully eco gym in Houston.
There isn't.
Unless somebody here knows.
It's probably the best place to find out. So,
Yeah, I say
Houston, any ecologically driven gyms?
What I was going to add is, so I'm an owner, and
Yeah.
I had, and we've been on about a year process of transitioning from IP.
Yeah.
I've been in jiu-jitsu for about 25 years, so I've kind of experienced it all. And I had 4 traditional black belts as employees and coaches.
Right.
And that's one thing that I never hear is brought up in all these discussions, because we're at the early onset of kind of connecting. But that was 3,000 times more difficult for me to process and turn over. I've released one completely. I'm in the process of releasing another one.
Yep.
Because I'm experiencing exactly what we're talking about, the contradiction of sneaking in an IP class.
Yeah, it's easier.
We have such a great gym culture that our students literally revolt. And say, we didn't learn.
They're grassing him off and telling you, he's been teaching us techniques again.
And we, it was ambitious. We have a relatively medium, kind of like a medium-sized school, but we're from age 7 to top. I have former UFC fighters at our gym.
Who's that? Who's the former UFC fighter?
Mike King. So we have a wide array of how this could be applied. We saw it positively across the board.
So you fought 4 black belts, and you told them that you wanted them to switch the approach.
Yeah.
And teach that way. How many did you retain then? Have you retained 1 or 2, did you say?
Retain 3.
You retained 3. With the first, because this is the other thing as well, like some people are going to be more receptive than others. And again, this is an individual thing. It's you don't know how someone's necessarily going to react. Some people might not want to, and it's a personality thing a lot of the time. I think that's incredibly difficult, like, approaching it that way.
I have a military background.
Yeah.
So I've overwhelmed them with training. I've funded 4 spots to come here.
Yeah.
It's constant conversation. The resources that Greg put out have been force-fed to everybody. We sit in on each other's classes. It's been a significant task.
As I say, I think with different people, it's going to be, you're going to have to approach them in different ways. Some people, you can go in hard and show them the science and they'll be like, shit, okay, that makes sense. With others, you've got to kind of gradually come in and get them to see it for themselves before you bombard them. But again, that's going to be kind of knowing how to kind of do it. What triggered you to switch over?
I was kind of a black sheep in the IP system coming through. I was just years and years of being told you can't do something that way. I've kind of an unorthodox game to begin with, where I used to have an unorthodox game. I just like to push the boundaries, have an open mind. I thought all of potential jiu-jitsu was something you should learn. I didn't like gatekeeping techniques for beginners. I mean, just about everything. I thought everything with my background and other things that I did were a waste of time. I hated warm-ups, I hated bowing. So we were primed to make the switch.
Yeah.
We were kind of an alternative school years ago already. We integrate tons of wrestling, so we're like a big wrestling school as well. So, I think we were already kind of leaning into looking for alternative. And it's something that I tell all of our students and coaches as well. If I find the next best thing, we're going to jump off of this.
Yeah.
So we're just always looking for efficiency.
I think, again, as a coach, like it's simple things as well of like, as a coach, it's like if you make a mistake, it's saying you made a mistake. Because I think under that original culture, like there's some people I've trained with for a long time, and that I've never seen them admit to a mistake. I've never seen them say they're wrong. Like I've never known them to say I don't know either. Apart from depends, I think I don't know is possibly my second most used phrase. Like, and it's accepting that you don't know the answer. And again, for me, I've been training a long time, and if I don't know something, I think that's really quite exciting, because then that gives me an opportunity to explore and find another way myself. So, but it's understanding kind of how the person's going to necessarily kind of react with it. And I think the approach having 4 established black belts and then bringing this approach to them, like that's fucking brave.
So this is just a long-winded way of saying, I've maybe connect with everybody that's an owner, if there are others here. If you're in the tri-state area and you want to coach, you have free reign to coach in my space anytime you want. So find your way.
Did you come here to headhunt a coach? You basically use this to fucking headhunt a coach. It's really smart. That's really clever. Anyone looking for a job that's... Do I get like a finder's fee, or like you're looking for a job? There you go.
No, I just want to see, can I see just raise of hands of who's trying to bring up you going to an IP gym right now? I'd love for us to just like connect and just be able to.
You're trying to what to?
To exchange ideas about like.
So you say you're training in an IP gym and you're trying to?
I started an OG program, just starting fully eco in a gym that was already established in IP.
Yeah.
So.
How was that accepted by? So for instance, the head coach there. How did they feel about you then teaching a different way?
Well, I think I had the advantage because they were friends of mine.
Okay.
So I was like, do you guys have a no-gi program? I'm already on the way out of my local school. I found out about this new methodology. Would be interesting.
The Greg Souders approach.
Yeah. The Greg Souders approach, yes.
Where is he? He's there.
I actually got time travel. I went back and hung out with Vincent. Like, I got this idea.
If you Google Greg Souders, you get more hits than Ecological Dynamics now. Like Greg Souders is the new buzzword. So seriously, like, see people teaching seminars and using him as a fucking buzzword. Like,
I'm disgusted with myself too.
He fucking loves it. He loves it. Right. Okay. Sorry. Yes. Yeah.
So I just want to piggyback on that. So as some of you did kind of do the sneaky approach, I flew under the radar teaching Eco for a year. One of the things is that students have so much fun. So basically what ended up happening is my coaches ended up getting feedback.
Yeah.
This was getting good. Now I'm going to 7 classes a week.
Yeah.
All eco, all live, So I think that, letting the process kind of feel itself out and get back, the feedback get back to the coaches is
Again, I don't think there's a correct way of necessarily implementing and applying it. It is finding a way that works for you. And I think what kind of needs to be understood is that every coach is going to be working within a different environment and a different room. So there is no set framework and blueprint for that coach. And I mean, that kind of goes back to an IP address, if you, an approach if you think that. So every coach is going to have slightly different ways of doing things because their kind of learning process and their environment and their room is going to be different. So, but I think this anecdotally, this is something I've found as well. Like, people just enjoy it more. And if you look at, there's a lot of kind of literature on classical learning and things, if people are happy, they learn more. There's better retention, they learn more if they're happy. If you're stressed, if you're unhappy, it's very hard to learn. These are very, very simple things, but I think they kind of get ignored, especially when you look back to kind of Erickson's work in deliberate practice, and I think one of the definitions of deliberate practice is it's not inherently enjoyable, which isn't necessarily a good thing. So, but thankfully Gladwell fucked all that up. Okay, any other questions before we move on quickly? Yeah.
Along those lines, I just wanted to mention, I run a gym in Framingham, and this guy here was training in our gym, and he split off and was doing his own thing, the ecological approach. And we got a little concerned because of liability, and we had him just become his own gym under our own roof, and he ran his own school, and now he's moving up to spend time with Greg. But it's interesting because I was exposed to, I like what he was doing, but it just wasn't going to fit.
Okay.
I run it, but there's another owner.
Yeah, this is it. This is the problem that a lot of people are going to, unless you own and run your own gym, you're not necessarily going to have the freedom to apply, the coaching how you want to, and that's the thing, because you're potentially going to be, it's a constraint. You're constrained by the environment. Your environment is not, welcoming to an ecological approach. Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to it, but it is. This is popping up a lot now because it's becoming more of people are more interested in the approach. I'm finding this is the problem. It's working within a gym which is IP, and it's very hard to kind of let them work them side by side. And I think it's probably very inefficient to work them side by side. Okay, I'm going to kind of crack on because we've got through like 3 slides. So athlete-centered versus coach-centered. This just kind of outlines what I'm talking about. The coach is not as important as the athlete. Like, whether you think you are or not, your goal is to make the athlete as good as they can possibly be. So your priority is the athlete. It's not looking as good as you can possibly look and having everyone think you know all the answers. So everything you do and any problem or any kind of approach you use should be prioritized to making the athletes and the students as good as they possibly can, not necessarily yourself. Okay, that's the thing. If you're potentially in the way, like a lot of the time with getting used to this approach is literally just stepping out of the fucking way and letting the room work. If it's set up well and the atmosphere is, and the culture's right, as a coach, a lot of the time you're just gonna have to step the fuck out of the way. You're observing and you're monitoring this as you can affect it, but trying to feel useful in that sense that you're kind of pointing, like potentially you're affecting the process of how this would work. Okay? Yes?
I tend to be more athlete-centered. What I've been doing is like quick Q&A break in between each game and just troubleshoot successes and challenges. And then I'll be like, tell us what you found successful in this thing.
Yeah, great.
Show us and explain to us. And I keep grappling with like, am I just using them as a proxy for explicit instruction? Or am I hurting? Am I helping? Should I have that?
I like this. This is the thing. I don't think there is a perfect way of doing it. Some coaches don't like the feedback Q&A stuff, some people do. If you can justify it within the framework, then that's fine. What you can also do is you can use that room to come up with really clever techniques, and you can use the Danaher approach, steal the techniques and class it as your own, okay? We all know Eddie Cummings came up with the leg lock system, but it's Danaher's leg lock system. I do that, I brainstorm the room because they might figure something out I don't know, and then the way it works, I'm the highest grade, anything on the mat, intellectual property belongs to me. This is fine. But one thing this does as well though, because I like people to talk to each other, I change partners all the time, whether that feedback or whether what they're saying is good or not, they're interacting. So every drill or exercise we do, we switch partners. Because you've probably been at a gym before where you've been on the mat with someone for 6 months and you haven't trained with them yet. Because you stick with your mate and you just do that. Now, with that feedback thing, whether you believe that feedback is helping them figure the technique out or not, what that's doing is kind of facilitating them to have a conversation and discussion with nearly every single person on the mat, which helps the culture and it helps their relationships and again, I think the relationships and the culture is being kind of missed here a lot. So I think it's a good way of doing it. And as well, it builds confidence in a lot of people. And what's interesting is with new people, like a lot of people won't speak up for the first like 2 years because they'll be like, I don't know anything. Now, if you from the beginning can get those white belts to engage straight away, like I find that, because again, I remember when I was a beginner, I didn't want to say a fucking word because I didn't want to sound stupid. And like, I think getting those lower grades and those new people to engage in that kind of conversation, again, starts to basically fuck up this hierarchy bullshit that none of us want anyway, and it starts to build a relationship. So I think there's other good reasons behind why you're doing that as well, which I like that. Okay, very quickly to move on. Educate an athlete. So I think this is very, very important because look, the way that the athlete or the student is going to engage with this training is different to the IP approach, okay? What we want them to be kind of exploratory with this. We want them to try and find new, we want them to risk things, try stuff, fuck stuff up, and do as many kind of, find as many solutions as they possibly can, okay? Again, with the mindset, most of you will have heard of Carol Dweck and the growth mindset, all this kind of stuff. Like, it's very kind of pop psychology nowadays, but it's still a very legitimate thing, and it's very, getting the athlete to understand that there is potential growth in this failure, and not trying to, I had an athlete very recently that I do kind of self-report with a lot of my athletes, which we'll talk about later, where I kind of get them at the end of the year to fill out self-report about what's good, what's bad, who they hate, who they don't hate, all this kind of shit, okay? And I find out one of my athletes was, they said that they like to be told what to do. And they like to know the answer because they don't really have confidence to try stuff. So this then gave me the opportunity to kind of talk to them individually, and the mindset of that is they don't want to fail. And this kind of, again, the next point on this is this reinterpretation of failure. Like, if you have a gym culture where you don't want to fail because you don't want to look stupid, this is going to be very fucking hard to do this. Very, very hard, okay? So that building of the culture and getting every single fucking person to understand that the failure, the fucking up, is part of that process, okay? You have to make these mistakes. Like, that's really, really important, and it's understanding that with a growth mindset, any kind of setback, any failure is a potential opportunity to learn. Fixed mindset, it's okay, well, I'm just shit at this. I'm not built for this. I'm not clever enough for this kind of stuff, okay? It seems simple. It seems very kind of shitty pop psychology stuff, but it makes a big, big difference, okay? Reinterpretation of failure kind of tails into this, okay? So I want people to fail when they're doing this stuff. Okay, if I've set a game, a protocol, a drill, whatever the fuck you want to call it, if I'm seeing someone have 100% success, then my intervention now has to be to make it harder for them. Okay, because they're not having enough of a challenge to actually start to adapt and grow and progress. Okay, it's potentially growing their ego, which is a problem, maybe a problem, but. So I need to be aware of this. That I like to use something called the challenge point, which is by Guadagnoli and Lee. Basically, there is a image of this on the next slide. And it's just a graphic from their paper, and it's just kind of this idea of finding the sweet spot for growth. Okay, it's and again, it's very, very difficult, as Greg kind of pointed out, to get people to find this, especially if it's an intensity thing. Because we all know that 40-50%, and but the way I see it, it's understanding whether you're having success and failure. Okay, so the intensity aside, if you're doing a game and you're having 100% success, if I can't attend to every single student at the same time. If I'm not seeing that, you've got to take some fucking ownership of your training, and you have to fix, change, alter something to make it harder for yourself. You guys have probably done this before, like if you're rolling with lower grades, you'll put yourself in worse positions, make it harder for yourself, because you've got to kind of try and get that difficulty in growth within your training, okay? Now, the good thing about this is the more experienced people can really kind of guide this, because if somebody's having 100% success, the other person is having 0% success most of the time. So with the more experienced students, you've got to get across to them that the goal of training is not to fuck everyone up, unless it's performance training. Like, this is about kind of development and acquisition and getting better. performance and transferring to performance is something a bit kind of different, okay? But if you're trying to improve the skill set, you have to have some kind of a challenge, okay? Now, the more experienced they are, they know that they roll in with a white belt, this is gonna be too easy, so they've got to make it harder for themselves. The plus side, that other person, the lower grade, will have more success. So this is going to give them, more to work on and, more potential avenues to go down, help motivation, all this kind of things. Does that make sense? I don't want to go over this in a lot of detail. I will do it another time, but I think the concept of this is really, really important. Yeah.
Have you seen the concept of zone of proximal development? I feel like it fits right into this.
I think it's
flow state.
Yeah, so that. I don't want to go off on a tangent. With flow state, like flow state is another one that I think.
It's more focused state than flow state. But the flow state was what they were measuring with the brain wave.
With Mihai Csikszentmihalyi,
the right challenge point.
It's all like that kind of like optimal training point and growth, and like if you're lifting weights and you're trying to get stronger, if the weight's too heavy, you can't lift it. If it's too light, there'll be no adaptation. That's the easiest way to kind of look at this. If you're trying to improve strength, for instance, and you're lifting weights, you have to stress the muscle. If you're not lifting the weight heavy enough, there won't be adaptation. If the weight is too heavy, you won't be able to shift it, so you won't be able to stress the muscle either. So it's finding that kind of sweet spot. Now, getting that across to athletes, I think, is very important, because shifting like kind of time and training partners stuff, you can manipulate this to try and find it, but it's very hard. There has to be ownership, there has to be buy-in from that athlete. Yes?
If you design a practice and let's say advanced people and beginners are together in the same class, would you say, okay, this is a game, but put some more constraint on the more advanced people?
I change constraints on an individual level with people, yeah. Like the game is usually a general game, and then this is where the intervention comes in. I will individual constraints for individual people, and because there's certain people that are doing certain things, and it's very, very hard to apply any kind of type of efficient training system in a room with 30 mixed level athletes. Like you can't do that efficiently. So you have to kind of work on an individual and a bespoke level of that. So absolutely. The initial game is a starting point, absolutely. And then that shows you will then see individual different things and as a coach, can I affect that in a positive way? Now, do I give direct instruction? Do I change constraints? Do I kind of use questioning to try and find them to get the answer? And so it's everything. Yeah, there was a hand up there, yeah.
I wanted to piggyback on that question, and I didn't actually know whether to ask you or Greg or whoever, but if you have a gym...
I'd ask Greg. You ask me and I'll ask Greg.
A lot of the eco gyms seem to have beginners, intermediate, advanced, or fundamental, all levels, advanced type of scenario.
Yeah.
But logistically, not in every gym do you have the space, the time, the funds to pay instructors, whatever it is, or the number of instructors. A lot of gyms have just one jiu-jitsu class.
Yep.
Right? And so if you're going to, and I don't know if there's any experience with anybody here in the room, with eco-based training, but in all levels class, and how is that structured and how is that run?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I match share with like genuine martial arts, proper ones like Aikido and Krav Maga, the real shit. So the whole time, I'm having to convince people this is legit. It's like, yeah, but these guys kill each other and they have like kind of fake AK-47s and shit. And so they think we're a joke, but I'm pretty confident my white belts will destroy their 10th degree black belts. But what's that? But it's not. It's a problem. And again, like Greg said before, you work with what you've got. Now, Greg said himself, he would change the way he approached things if he had a room full of 7-day-a-week elite athletes, Division I wrestlers. He would change it a different way. But you fucking coach what's in front of you. You work with what's in front of you. It's difficult. It's very, very difficult. And again, with something like that, getting the buy-in of the advanced athletes is really important, because they're going to be helping as well. Now, if I really want to work with the advanced athletes and make them top level guys, that might not be the way of doing it. But with what I've got, they're invested in this process, and having them there with the lower grades on the mat, like this idea of the culture and intensity of training, all this kind of stuff. Again, Greg says, you've got 2 white belts. You can go light, and they'll kick the shit out of each other. They won't get it. Now you pick up the kind of the intensity and the tempo of the role from rolling with the more advanced people, you start to mirror what you're encountering in the environment a lot of the time. So I think it's really important to get that. I may split things, I may not. It's something that when I have more mat space, I will start to explore myself. But it's a logistics problem. It's going to come up and you're going to have these kind of issues. So, yeah.
Maybe a scenario I'm dealing with right now. 6 a.m. class, it's supposed to be like a 40
6 a.m.?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
And I got one guy who's 276.4 and jacked. Okay.
270, what's that in kilos? Be metric.
270 pounds.
You've got like 3 countries in the world that use that. Everyone else uses metric, guys. Come on. 120 kilos?
24 stone.
Right, okay. All right, it's a really fucking heavy dude, man.
He's big, he's superhero, you know? And everybody else in the class is normal, right? So the way I've been dealing with
Dude, you can't say normal anymore, mate. That's not PC. You get your Twitter cancelled. Yeah. Oh, you have to. Everyone has to take responsibility at some point. We've got a few of those guys, and everyone's got to take a turn. Everyone's got to take one for the team. Yeah. With him, so what's his approach to training? Does he just, whatever you put in front of him, do you just fucking destroy it? Or will he kind of, moderate his training? Or
he can just, like if he constraints in the game or whatever, he can just pretty much override.
So this is the point. He's going to have really high success in most things just because of, so you've got to get across to him that if he actually wants to get better and not hit a ceiling at kind of purple belt when other people have got technical ability at his size, he's got to try and kind of almost limit himself, restrict himself in order to try and kind of learn that. Okay, I find it a lot I think it's very, very hard to be technical, and it's very hard to get technical as a bigger, stronger guy when you're starting jiu-jitsu, because just throwing people around and using strength works really well.
So he's a nice guy. He wants to work his technique. When he understands that, he actually holds back, I feel like, a lot of times.
Good.
But he's just so big. You know what I mean? There's just so much to deal with.
Have you tried tying 2 white belts together? Just for the TikTok views, it'd be worth it. So, it's very, very difficult. With someone like that, they have physical capabilities and action capabilities beyond other people. You're going to have to work with people in different ways. With him, it's getting across to him, and it's difficult. Have you got like a local like football club or something that you can kind of try and get?
Trying to get people to come 6 a.m.
Yeah. I wouldn't if that guy was there, to be honest. So it's difficult. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about your go-to for individualizing constraints? Or would you put somebody with someone who's at a superior skill level, or prohibit them from doing a certain thing, or put them in situations where you kind of like feed the mistake?
Yeah. Okay, so this kind of comes onto the intervention. It's like, you got to kind of, it's why you're intervening, it's what you feel the error potentially is, and it's how you can best kind of fix that error by changing constraints, by giving direct feedback, indirect feedback, finding if someone is, for instance, giving away an underhook all the time, and they're giving it away more often than they should be, but they're not aware of it yet. You use an athlete who is really shit hot on underhooks, and you try and amplify that error in order to make it kind of visible to them. So we will come on to this more when we move on. Again, let's keep moving because I'm not getting through this very quickly. So. Understanding athletes, we'll skim through this because it's a bit more soft psychology, and Greg will hate it. So motivation. So it's understanding the athlete. We're talking about educating the athlete. So previously it's just getting the athlete to understand what the approach is and what their role is in engaging with that training. They know that it has to be this challenge point, it has to be difficult. If the training's too easy, then if I've set the training too easy, then I've made a mistake. They need to then take ownership and responsibility of that kind of training, okay? So understanding the kind of motivation, whether it's intrinsic, extrinsic, the research on this, if it's an extrinsic motivation, if you just want to be a world champion and stuff, if that's the only motivation, that can, if you can't get there or you get there, it can die out. Intrinsic, things like enjoyment and various things is obviously better. Goals and targets. These are things you are unfortunately going to have to put some fucking time in with and discuss things with athletes. This is the other thing. As I say, I use self-report a lot of the time to try and get these answers out of people, but you're going to have to take time to get to know the person in front of you. Because the more you know about them, and the more you know about their personality and their goals and targets and their life situations, this can affect how you teach the person. okay? As I say, with the low confidence from the self-report I found about this guy, didn't want to engage with the class and explore and engage properly because he had that low confidence. So I did what no one likes to do, and I gave him a little bit more direction. I gave him a little bit more kind of explicit direction, just so he had an idea of what to do and to build up his confidence. Very, very quickly, his confidence built up and he started to explore and do more stuff. Now, my answer was to try and give him some success and give him some guidance in an explicit kind of IP manner to build up his confidence. I know that it's not representative and it's too constrained, but I was using that in order to try and build up the motivation that would then get him to engage and get him to be motivated to train the way I think he should be training. So it's being aware of that kind of stuff, okay? Training relationships, you're all going to be at gyms where there's good and bad training relationships. I think keeping track of that is very, very important. You want to be, this is another reason why I switch training partners a lot, to try and build kind of relationships between all of the athletes and to stop these annoying fucking cliques developing in the gym that become toxic and split off and cause huge disputes between people. And interest as well within the sport on a technical level. I do a lot of kind of self-directed training where the people decide what they want to work on and what their area of kind of interest is going to be. Obviously I have input on what I think it should be, but it's just added information for them to make the decision, okay? Self-report, again, I use general self-report at the end of the year to have an idea of where people think they are, where people think the training was good, is bad, good relationships, bad relationships, strengths, weaknesses. I use pre and post-comp self-report as well, because again, most of you will be aware that some people can be absolute killers in the training room, and when they step on a competition mat, it's like watching someone else. So these things can kind of help try and identify what you can do to try and get them better in that environment. Mutual target setting, the psychometric, I'm going to skip that. There's someone I'm working with at the minute who has access to psychometric testing. There's a guy called Adam Nichols who's one of the head lecturers at Hull University. So like with psychometric testing, it would appear it's really fucking expensive and you can't just go on the internet and get it. So I'm trying to use him to get it, and but this is going off on a tangent and there's a lot of crazy shit I want to do. Will you put your hand up then, or no? Can't do that. Like, I'm going to get distracted far too easily. Mutual target setting. Right, we've skipped over that very, very quickly. Okay, so let's just very, very quickly answer this, because this is really what I wanted to talk about, this kind of idea of intervention. So what I'm showing now is a skill training communication model by Otti. This is something I stumbled across about 6 months ago after I'd kind of played about and tried to find my own way of doing it. So I was really interested in this idea of when to intervene and how to intervene. So if you see something potentially happening that you think might be wrong or there's a better way, is dangerous or whatever, it's when you intervene, how you intervene. Again, it's just kind of dispelling this idea that you set the game and you just leave it and you don't do anything, okay? The way I did it is with the coach I was working with, I got them all to wear body cams. I preferred it on the head, but a lot of them didn't want to wear it on the GoPros on their head. And any time they intervened and went over, I could see the footage of intervening. So I could kind of see roughly what they saw. I could hear the intervention. And when they walked away, I asked them to kind of verbalize why they were intervening and what they thought they saw. So the framework I came up with before I saw this Otti paper was based on me just weirdly, like heuristically, just watching people interact and in like a POV style, okay? So the Otti models, there's more to it, but I've just kind of highlighted the feedback and instruction methods. Instructive, which is direct, internal, external focus of attention. That trial and error, which is basically allowing people to find a way. Analogies, which this is used quite a lot in the ecological approach, providing analogies in order to try and, again, I think that one of the common ones that people use is like when serving with tennis, they say try and move the arm like a rainbow or something like that. It's all very kind of, but apparently this is very good. Rob Gray says so, and I'm not going to question him. Task orientated, which is kind of what we do. We set tasks, we set intention, and we set an intention of what they're trying to achieve, and they find a way to achieve it. Model learning, which is watching someone do a technique and then trying to mimic them. Q&A, again, with the feedback stuff that you were mentioning before. Live video feedback, showing people videos of themselves training and competing, and then kind of getting a third person view from that. Okay, so the way I kind of work now with my coaching and with my coaches, I have 4 general kind of categories of intervention. One is constraints, manipulation, and modification. One is questions or questioning, which are split into indirect or direct. One is indirect instruction, or what I refer to as counter coaching. And the other one is direct instruction, which is external focus of attention or internal focus of attention. Okay. Now, I'm not saying one is better than the other necessarily, or one should be used here or not. That is what's available. You make that decision based on what's in front of you and what you feel will work best for the problem you feel you have. Okay. So when to intervene? Too much success, not enough success. If something's dangerous, with something that's dangerous, just fucking tell them. Don't try and be clever. If people are just jumping in and doing like cannabis sammies and flying scissors and shit, just give them a bollocking and say no. Don't try and change the constraints. Mechanical inefficiency. And that's based on whether you feel that it's a wildly inefficient way they're trying to achieve the intention, okay? You've got to consider whether it's development or performance. So are they kind of competition training? Are they trying to transfer to what you can replicate as the most competition-like environment possible? Or is it a normal training session where it's development? Training phases we're going to skip because that's going to go on to something else. And short-term versus long-term gains. Now, long-term gains, if we're in a normal session and I'm trying to get someone to develop a certain skill or work on something, then I'm going to act in a very different way than if I'm at a competition, someone's just fucked them up and they've come off the mat and they're about to fight again. Like, my intervention at that point is going to be short-term because I want them to win the next match. Okay, in the training room, it's going to be more long-term and more kind of growth-orientated. Okay, what time are we at now? 7 minutes, right? Yep.
The short-term intervention, is that more restrictive? Do this, don't do this.
Pretty much. It's like, you see what you did there?
How
Yeah.
you do this, because I have 30 seconds to explain to you the answer, and you need the answer.
Absolutely. Because look, the old-fashioned way of diet, it's really fucking easy, isn't it? Like, we know this. It potentially can give you short-term gains. And now, if you're in a competition and you've got one more fight left, and you know the guy they're fighting does a certain thing, then just fucking tell them. Just because you want a short-term gain. When you get back into the gym, you can be really clever about it. And you can design games and things, that's fine. But if it's a high level, you want that win, that style of coaching and intervention is going to be different to a kind of long-term training room kind of perspective, okay? What I'll consider when I'm intervening is, am I limiting their potential solutions? So am I constraining them so much that they're not able to kind of look at other options and find something that works for them? Affecting their agency for decision making. As much of the training as possible, I want them to be allowed to make decisions. So I don't want to restrict them so much that I'm taking away the ability of them to actively make decisions within the environment, because ultimately that's what it's going to come down to. Okay, they have to become very, very efficient decision makers, and the less opportunity I give them to make decisions, then the less they're going to be kind of good at that. Creating deep attractors, over-reliant movement patterns, we'll skip over it because it will take ages. Creating a needlessly artificial environment. Like, everything we do, I want to have the training within an environment and as realistic and as close to competition as possible. Now, I will drop that kind of representativeness and make it more artificial sometimes. I'll play about with intensity, but I will have a reason and a justification for changing that. If I didn't, everything would be 100% and it would be as close to competition as possible, okay? Focusing athletes' attention away from specifying information. Specifying information is going to be external most of the time, so this focus of attention, it's important. I don't want to be taking their attention away from areas of the environment that I feel they're going to be finding solutions. I should be doing the absolute fucking opposite. I should be trying to push their attention towards where they're going to be able to find a usable solution, okay? We'll skip through this very quickly because we've almost finished. So constraint manipulation. So we look at like half guard knee shield and get chest to chest. Changing the intention. So it's put opponent flat. If they're not getting this chest to chest, then I can say, I want you to put them flat. I want you to get the far shoulder flat or something like that. So slightly shifting the intention of the athlete. More of a harder constraint. Say if they're finding this far too easy and they're putting the person flat every time and the other guy's not getting it, I can take away the ability of the option for head control. So I will then say, try and put them flat, try and get chest to chest, but I don't want you actively manipulating the head. I don't want you cross-facing. So again, it's bringing these things in, taking away depending on what I'm seeing in front of me. Another changing constraint would be no knee shield. So if the person was really struggling with a knee shield initially, I can take the knee shield away and bring them closer to the intention. Yes?
So just to clarify, this is on an individual level, not on
Yes.
a collective?
This will, I will set, like, as I say, the general class thing would be knee shield, half guard knee shield. I want the person on top to get chest to chest. Everyone does that. Now what I'm seeing individually, I may change this person's constraint because they're finding it too easy and they're smashing that knee shield and getting head control every time. So I can maybe take away the head control, or I can, potentially get the person at the bottom to use a butterfly hook or something like that to make it harder. So my goal is changing that challenge point by changing the constraints there as well. Somebody may have an issue with, again, they can't get past the knee shield. So we can come back to that. But initially I want them to get better at putting the person flat, so I'd get them past the knee shield. I'd put them closer to the end point just to kind of increase the success and decrease the success of the other person, okay? Again, this... Yeah.
Are you then, right, because sometimes there's odd numbers in the room. Do you ever jump in, or are you looking in the room? I haven't trained for a while because I'm waiting on a knee replacement, so I've got a good excuse at the minute. So this is the thing. I think you need to train with the individual athletes. I agree with this, but you also need to watch. This is the problem. So again, because I haven't been training much, I've been able to coach from a perspective of basically like a Danaher perspective, where he doesn't kind of actually train with them much at all, but difference being I've actually competed where John Danaher hasn't. So I obviously have that competition experience. So actually the last sort of 3-4 months has given me another perspective because I haven't been jumping in. So it's allowed me to moderate the room and observe the room more than previously. And it's made me realize that there's a lot more I could be doing observationally. But I'm also realizing that I have the ability to change constraints and kind of facilitate behavior on the fly as I'm rolling. And I think that's what most coaches will always do. If you're rolling with someone, if there's something you're trying to get someone to do, you can facilitate that through the way you're rolling with them. You can give things away, make mistakes, potentially guide through the physical rolling. So that's, it's another way of coaching. So again, questioning, I use this a lot as well. So I want them to try and find the solution without giving them the answer. I'll use what I refer to as direct or exploratory and direct. So, scenario is knee shield half guard, person trying to get chest to chest. Person on the bottom keeps getting under the hook, keeps coming out the back door, okay? Over and over again. So I'm seeing this continuously happen. I'm not really seeing much kind of adaptation from the person in top, and they keep giving it away. I'll make a decision, okay, I'm going to try and push them towards an area of solution here. So indirect would be, what are they doing to get behind you? So I will not tell them exactly what they're doing, but I will get them to try and search for what they think is the problem. Direct would be, I would mention the idea of the inside control and the underhook, and then I would suggest how would you potentially stop this? So first one would be I would try and get them to figure out roughly where the problem is. The second one is I would identify where the problem is, but then they would have to try and find the solution. So again, as I say, like the first one is more about getting them to focus the attention. The second one is I'm focusing the attention myself and getting them to search within that area. Did you hang them up?
Yeah, so instead of directly, I kind of have a wide swath. I only have like 2 or 3 people in class sometimes, so I might have a guy like this, that's the monster, and I have, some I have a physique girl, so there's a big difference. Do you, instead of directly coaching it, do you change the constraint? So do you maybe, instead of going, knee shield, that guy was a monster, you go, no, you can pinch the half guard, but you're not getting the knee in. So you're not telling the top person they need to smash that knee and push it out of the way.
Yeah.
But you're giving them a different path? Like, is that something?
Yeah, but it's just it's another way of getting them to fight. I'd say if I'm intervening, I feel there's a problem. I feel there's just they're not engaging with the task. They're not searching and finding solutions, and I want them to try and use their training time as efficiently as possible. Now, this failure and continued failure might long-term be efficient because it might be part of the process. As a coach, I have to decide whether I can fast-track it slightly. Now, if I fast-track it, is it going to guide them or force them down one specific route more than opening up or not? This is the point, like that coaching's really fucking difficult under this kind of framework because you can't just give them fucking answers. You have to individually try and figure out what you think is the best way to help guide and facilitate their learning within the environment. So I don't think there's necessarily right and wrong ways. And the point I made at the beginning is, as a coach, you should be trying all these different ways. You're getting the student to explore and search the environment for ways of doing it. Well, you're doing the same fucking thing. So you should try these different ways and individual kind of differences between people. You can do certain things with this person and this person. Like, the point that a lot of people make is once you get a black belt, then people start to coach and to teach, but they've never taught or coached before. It's not the same fucking thing. I don't care how many competitions you've won, what your experience level is. If you've never taught or tried to communicate information across, you're fucking at the very beginning of learning this process. So it has to be, again, it's a growth mindset. I set stuff so regularly that I think is shit and it doesn't work. But I don't just get annoyed, and well, I do get annoyed, but I realize that mistake is potential for me to grow as a coach. So everything we've talked about is mirrored back to the coach. You should be having that approach. You should be failing and trying to improve on it and searching the environment. And then when you do, you should be looking to try and exploit these answers and then calibration and all this kind of stuff, okay? Yes?
Do you have a percentage of the room where you look around and see, like, percentage of failure? So you look around your room and you're like, all right, I need to restart this game entirely, start with a new percentage? Yeah, it depends what's going on. It depends what's going on, yeah. If it's kind of 50-50 success and failure, that's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that, but it never fucking happens. I've done it many times where the idea is to work on a certain thing, and I've set a game and got them going, and it's just an utter clusterfuck. Someone's got like a black eye, and then someone's rolled off, and it's just, you have to make a judgment call of like, what they're doing now, is it efficient training, or is it just a fucking mess? Now, a mess isn't necessarily bad, because what we do is really chaotic and messy, and if it's not, then it's probably wrong anyway, if it's really choreographed. And so you have to kind of make a judgment call with that. Normally it's a case of every session I've got a general idea of what I want to work on, and then I'll have an idea of how to get it going, and then we go wherever we kind of go. But if it's not kind of helping them develop what we're trying to look at, or something else which I feel is beneficial, then yeah, we kind of pull them back in. And again, I really kind of push this idea of co-design as well. Like, a lot of the really kind of good games I've come up with have not been mine. They've been my students. So this is the thing. It's a collaborative kind of process, and I'm getting their input, and we're kind of designing these things together. And then when it goes back to this idea of self-directed training, where they train and they're deciding what they train on, they're all now pretty good at setting their own constraints and stuff. And I can Danaher it and just nick it, pretend it's mine, and basically benefit from their intelligence. So yeah, that's the question. Yes, sorry. This format was really bad, wasn't it? We should have just done a Q&A. Sorry, yeah.
When someone is like having disproportionate success and you give them additional constraint, like not getting hit control, do you worry that you're like preventing them from making like a proper read on what their partner is giving them,
yep,
and like making them artificially ignore?
Yes. Yep, absolutely. But that's the thing. Look, if I'm saying to someone you can't cross-face the guy, I know that I'm taking away potentially part of that decision making and the options as well. I know I'm lowering that representativeness. So it's just trying to justify it. Maybe it's something that they become super overly reliant on, and it's the only thing they do within that position. Now, I'll take that away knowing that it's going to be there in the live environment in the competition. So it's lower representativeness and it's more artificial, but the reason I'm doing that
is to force them to search somewhere else and find more solutions within that area. So that's this. It's this. You've got to be aware of why you're doing something. There's no perfect way of doing it. You're going to have to potentially sacrifice one thing to work on another. And the other thing, as I say, it's getting people aware that, you know, if they want to work on another part of their game away from their A game, their game overall success is going to drop short term. Because there's these kind of, you'll find people have very inefficient ways sometimes of doing things that almost kind of hit a ceiling. And they get to that point, and you know that if you kind of break them out of this habit to a more mechanically efficient way of doing it, long term it will be better because the ceiling will be higher. Now you've got to get across to the athlete that short term, they're going to get shitter. But long term, this new movement pattern that potentially you're trying to get them to find and attune to is going to have higher success. And then it's the experiential knowledge of the coach to know that this potentially has more success, which you could be right or wrong about. So, yes?
So I guess to get back on that was a really good question. I just want to be a little bit more clear on this. So you think that if you're seeing a situation of two students and then like there's clearly a disparity in like the success or failure,
yes,
and you go to the student that's having more success and then you start imposing these additional constraints, that's going to stunt their development long term, as far as like they're not able to, the fact that they're not going to have the opportunity to find those themselves, that's going to stunt their development.
It depends how long I'm imposing that constraint. Because it could just be to level it up with that one partner and they go to another partner and everything opens back up again. What I like to, if I'm working on a certain area and I'm imposing these constraints, I don't like to finish the session without opening it back up again and allowing all the constraints back in again. Now, the longer you impose certain constraints, the more it's going to affect the movement patterns. So it's being aware if you are imposing certain constraints and you are lowering that representativeness, if you do it for a long time, it will have a potentially bad effect on that movement pattern. So this is why you tweak and you change those constraints all the time, because you don't want to hinder them by taking away part of the game for so long. Again, for instance, somebody starts jiu-jitsu and then they figure they can only train leg locks when they get to brown belt. Like you've taken away a huge part of the game. They have developed a game that works for them around nobody breaking their legs. And then they get to brown belt and everyone just fucks them up. Because you've taken a massive part of the game away. It has to be there. So if you take part of the game away, why are you doing it? And again, how long are you taking it away for? So you've got to be, again, it's being aware of that. Are there any other hands there? Yes, sorry.
Where I'm currently struggling with this is decoupling submissions from games. Like, if I have a game that's more variable, and it's obvious that, in the process of them playing this game, they're giving away a certain submission, but if it's not part of the constriction of the game to play the submission, I'm worried that I'm putting them,
Yeah. It's because you will take, for instance, you'll take away a submission to try and get them to explore another area, and obviously it takes away. This is what I mean. It hinders the agency of the decision making. The thing. I think if you're just aware that you're doing it, that's the most important thing initially, because you have to change things in order to focus on certain areas. And I do it a lot, but again, with something like that, for instance, if we're starting on the back and I want to push them towards arm bars, I'll say you can't attack the neck. Now I know that will hugely affect the way they play the back. Okay, defensively, the person won't defend the neck, all this kind of stuff. I'll do it every now and then, but I won't do it for long, and I will always scale it back up again to a full game before I let them leave the room, if I possibly can. This is the thing. This is what I mean. There's no correct way of doing it, and again, the reason I've done that will be based upon what I'm seeing in front of me in the room. Now, it might not be the answer for some of you because your environment might be different. Your students might be different. You might not need to, you might need to. Like, I can give you an idea of what I do and why I think I do it. But as I say, it's the environment and the way the coach interacts with the environment is going to be different throughout all of your coaching. That's the thing. Just very quickly to finish. Indirect counter coaching. I'm going to really skip through these. If I want to try, this is when I'll do it too. I like to try and amplify. This is something within kind of ecological dynamics. If I see a problem, rather than telling someone it's a problem, I like to try and make that problem even bigger. I like to try and amplify the problem so they see it's there. And this is when I'll usually use other people to really fucking hammer something. Or if somebody keeps giving away an underhook, I'll get a guy in a room that's really good at an underhook. So I'll make it really fucking obvious. and then they'll notice it's a problem, and then they'll try and fix themselves. So if I can get them to identify a problem or perceive it without directly telling them, it's better. And if I can make that problem so fucking big that they can then see it, then okay, again, it's a temporary thing, but it's almost a way of guiding their attention, because their attention is clearly not where that person is getting the underhook. So if I can make that underhook a bigger issue, their attention will go there, and that's where they're going to be searching. Okay. And again, last one. No, that's possibly it, I think. So, oh no, last one. Oh, fuck's sake. Right. Direct instruction. Okay. Internal, external focus of attention. Like this is, as I say, if I'm using direct instruction, if I can, I will use it with external language. So I will give the instruction, and the language I'm using will be in reference to their environment. Their environment is their opponent. Okay, so any language I use will be in reference to their opponent's body, and what they are trying to kind of achieve against their opponent. How are they trying to affect their opponent? Okay, if I have to use internal focus, it'll be the same old shit of put your hand here, turn your wrist, move your hip, all this kind of stuff, which we're trying to avoid. Okay, I daren't ask if there's any fucking questions, but are there any questions that I just, okay, go on.
It was timing earlier to the question more about students on the extreme end to the side spectrum, but I know you're worried about time. I want to let you get through everything.
It's okay, I just don't want to piss everyone off. That's all it's like.
When you're dealing with students on the extreme ends of size, and obviously you want to create as much variability with training partners as possible. Yeah. But because they're on the extremes, you're going to have less total people, either be really small or really large. Yep. And that's to put your from an MMA standpoint as well. How do y'all view partnering them up with the same few partners at that size versus getting with everybody else? Because from a smaller person standpoint, they can obviously get a lot of work with every size because everyone's going to be larger and stronger or the same size as them. But someone who's 6'4" and 270, there's not a whole lot they're getting out of a 100-pound or 130-pound teenager because they can just, like Graham was talking earlier, just bench press them off and just throw them around.
I think a lot of this, again, comes to the education of the athlete and understanding that if the person knows, whoever they're training with, they're trying to get something out of that training. Like one thing I've heard for years and years and years, I feedback from white belts would be, I don't like training with this person, I don't like training with the higher grades because I feel I'm wasting their time. Now, to me, they're not wasting the higher grade. The higher grade doesn't know how to train, in that opinion. It's on them. I don't care who you train with, you should be able to get something out of that training. You've got to be a bit clever. Maybe, you can potentially give your training partner some information as well, if you're more experienced, and try and get them to have more success. But it's this idea of putting yourself in worse positions, trying to make it harder for yourself. Putting a constraint on. Like maybe the idea is you're going to let them get chest to chest and you're not allowed to try and get underhooks. You've got to try and get out. So, but it comes down to the athlete understanding that I can't be there constantly changing everything for them all the time. So they have to then take that ownership, and this is why I think educating the athlete, my job is as much about teaching them how to train and how to learn as it is, I say to teach them how to jiu-jitsu, but I don't really teach them jiu-jitsu clearly. So that's the key thing. And the more eventually you get, the more you learn how to train. And the more you learn to train, you're going to be able to get development in any environment, if you can, but you're never going to have that perfect training room.
So if you have a small, or you have a group of competitive athletes and you only have, let's say, 2 guys that are on the heavier side, like I know Greg was a few months ago posting trying to get heavyweight guys with the team because they were a little smaller. Are you more likely to have those two work a lot more?
They will, yeah. Look, I will sacrifice variability for getting them used to the weight. Yeah, but again, I know I'm doing it. I get my guys to cross train all the time. Any open mat within like a 30-mile radius, I make them go and train there. Constantly getting them to cross train. We have a free open mat on a Sunday where it's 2 hours, it's completely free. We get people from all over London. I'll go in one week, there's 30 people, the next week there's 30 people again, and they're all different people. So my guys get to do live training every week with a room full of different people, so they get that variability in training partner as well. There's a lot of cross-training in London for the more advanced guys as well. Like I'm part of a group where the bigger guys, the high-level big guys in London all train. A load of my guys I send with over with Ross Nichols and Ono Flanagan, all that lot. They all have their own individual training to kind of get that level and get that variability in the training. The more people you can train with, the more you're going to basically learn about the environment, and the more experience the environment you're going to get. But you might lose your students, so you've got to say, oh, you don't go and train with anyone else and do the whole Gracie Barra bullshit.
So within your gym, you would say within the confines of your students, you put those two people together, sacrifice their ability, but force them or encourage them to go to as much open mass across the as possible to meet other people.
It may also depend on where have they got a competition coming. If they've got a competition coming up as well, absolutely, absolutely. I've got to replicate in that competition environment. It's probably going to be more important. So, if they're 120 kilos and they're rolling with like a 70 kilo person, then that's not getting them ready for what they're going to be encountering in competition. So that periodization of training, I think periodization of skill training is a really important thing, and that has to be done at an individual level. And that individual athlete, I will constrain and change, and depending on that individual athlete and what they are doing and what they need to do. Okay, I've gone over like by 15 minutes. Thank you. Thank you very much.